Yeah, greet them if you would. Well, we all know the Christmas story. There's not anybody in the room that hasn't heard it. We know Luke chapter 2, verse 7. I'm just going to put it on the screen. You can read it for yourself. There's no room in the what? There's no room in the inn. Say that with me. No room in the inn. We all know that. And we all understand that it was a long journey. It was an 80-mile journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem. And when they got there, they didn't have kayak or Airbnb, and they couldn't, pre-register, right? And so this was like, we get there and there's no room in the inn. And so we kind of understand that because that's happened to us physically. There's no room, sometimes physically, or there's no room for us emotionally. We all have an emotional capacity. We understand only so much room. You're going on a trip, and you're going to take one car. And then you realize that, all the girls in your family have 3 pieces of luggage instead of just one, and it's not going to work, right? I mean, I'm not speaking from experience, of course. That's just figuratively speaking. And so now at the last minute, we've got to take 2 cars. We have a beautiful dining room table that was given to us years ago, and we are actually some of the few people. How many of you use your dining room? Raise your hands high. And how many of you use the dining room table? We love that. But there's only 8 chairs, and so 8 people can sit around our dining room table. So occasionally when there's like 10 or 11 or 12 people, we borrow chairs from other places in the house and put them all around our dining room table. But again, the table's only so big and there's only so many people. So when we have 18 or 19 people, which is not unusual because Ethan has lots of friends and he brings everybody over, and Ethan says 3 people are coming for dinner, but we know another 15 are coming, so we prepare for it. We just know that. So we have a glass table out in the lanai. We bring the glass table in, but we only have 20 chairs. 20 is it. If you're number 21, sorry, you're on the floor, right? So there's only so much room. I remember when Ethan and Erica were in high school, we had the youth group over one night, and we had 58 students in our house. Our house is not that big. I was so proud of Danita. We moved out the dining room table. We moved all the furniture out into the lanai, and I looked in that room. You couldn't get another body in there. There were 58, it was wall-to-wall legs. There was 116 legs in that house that night. It was incredible. You know what this is like with a closet that's full, and you've got guests over, and you're just praying they don't miss the bathroom and open the closet because everything's going to fall out of the closet, right? You know what I'm talking about. There's only so much room physically. But we also only have so much room emotionally. I call this a stress barrel. Every one of you has a stress barrel, and you're putting things in the barrel, and then eventually when that barrel gets full, it tops over, and it's ugly when it spills out, right? Just 7 of you? Okay. We're going to take communion twice tonight if we need to for the rest of you. And the point is, of course, we all have a stress barrel, and the barrel will fall over. So our theme tonight is prepare him room. Now, you make room for a lot of things. You make room to work out. You make room for your job. You make room to go on vacations. You make room for adventure. You make room. But let me ask you this question. Do you make room for Jesus? That's the question this evening. Let's talk for just a minute as a team. What do people make room for? You want to jump in here? What do people make room for today?
Yeah, people make room for family, which is a really good thing. They make room for family, and if a child happens to be really good at something, they go out of their way to make room. So let's say the child's musical, you're going to make room for piano lessons and drum lessons or vocal lessons, or maybe your child's athletic. We make room for soccer and swimming and gymnastics and all sorts of things. So I see us making, as an American culture, making a lot of room for our family and our family's skill development.
We do. We make room for that. John Mark, what do you see?
Well, I think all of us kind of, to go along with last Sunday's sermon, we kind of seek comfort. And so we make room for the things that make us comfortable, whether it's sitting down, watching Netflix, opening up that bottle of your favorite beverage and just hanging out by the fireplace.
Did he just say that? John Mark used to work on our staff. That's funny.
That's what we sometimes make room for the things that bring us comfort, you know?
We do.
Stuttering now, nervous.
We'll talk later, John, Mark. How can we make more room for Jesus? How can we do this? How can we have more space in your life? Now, there's lots of good things that you're doing. You're doing lots of things really, really well. But how can you have more space? So I came up with a cell phone idea. If I have a cell phone, the cell phone really represents IQ and EQ. That's big today. EQ is big today. IQ, how smart you are. EQ, your people skills. And so a cell phone is limited. A cell phone has limited capacity, but spiritual intelligence is not like a cell phone. Spiritual intelligence is like attaching yourself to the World Wide Web. So you've got intelligence, IQ, EQ, but do you want to have God solving your first world problems? That's what you can make room for. And then how do you give him the best rooms? I don't know all of you. I've missed all of you. I've missed you. But if you were to come over, you can all come to our house tonight. Is that okay? They can all come tonight. We actually don't care. There's only room for 20 of you at the table, but you can all come. If you came over to our house tonight, if Amos, and he's been at my house many times, if Amos came over to the house tonight, I'm not putting Amos in the closet. Right? If Lisette comes over tonight, I'm not putting her in the pantry. I'm putting him at the table. If you come over tonight, we have a room with a baby grand piano. It's the best furniture we have in the house. I'm not putting you back where the kids, play, where the grandkids are. I'm putting you with the best furniture. My point is this. Probably we haven't thought through preparing him room. Most likely we haven't thought about preparing the best space of our life for Jesus Christ to occupy. Because here's what tends to happen. We end up having a heart like this picture. And the heart with this picture is, I'm doing good things, but I'm not aligned with the best things. You can be doing a whole lot of really good things in your life, but if you are not in alignment with the best things, you won't have this heart. And this guy's heart is aligned, he's in alignment with his Heavenly Father. I have a mentor, his name is Kent Stickler. Kent is 80 years old. And Kent is a business leader. He's owned his own businesses at age 80. He's still traveling the country. He's still teaching leadership to bankers all over our country. Kent is just pure silk. And he has memorized over 250 scriptures that every morning he goes through 250 verses every single morning. So he's a business leader. He's a spiritual leader. And for the last 17 years, he's been my mentor. I knew that his daddy was a preacher. But until 2 weeks ago, I did not know that his daddy was a jail preacher. And the dad would take Kent and his older sister and the mother to the Methodist church, drop them off, and while Kent and the family were in Sunday school and then church, he was in Quincy, Illinois at the county jail preaching the gospel. And every Sunday for 40 years, Don Stickler preached the gospel to all these inmates. And so 2 weeks ago, Kent was telling me about a story that took place in 1952 when Kent was 12 years old. There's a knock on the door. There's no air conditioning, by the way, at Millennials and Generation Z in 1952, just in case you're curious. It's a screen door. He's looking through the screen, and Kent is at the door, and a man comes up to the door, knocks on the door, and he says, "Is your father home?" He says, "Yes, he is. I'll go get him." So 12-year-old Kent goes and gets his dad. Don Stickler then comes to the door, and the man on the other side of the screen, on the outside of the porch says, "My name is Lester B. Clooney. Do you remember me?" He's looking at him. He's going, "No, I don't recall that I do." He said, "Well, about a decade ago, you came to my cell, and I told you to go to hell. I didn't want any of your two-bit religion, and I spit on you." Mr. Stickler said, "I do remember you." Kent's 12 years old over in the hallway. Mr. Stickler invites Mr. Clooney to come in the house. And within about 18 or 19 minutes, both men are down on their knees. And Lester B. Clooney gives his life to Jesus Christ in their living room. He knew that Don Stickler had prepared him room. He knew that Don Stickler would receive him and could help him with his spiritual malady. So let's talk about the Christmas story. Let's unpack it today. And I want to do something that maybe you've never quite heard before. The Christmas story really doesn't begin with Mary and Joseph. It really doesn't begin even with the angel Gabriel coming to Mary. You're going to have a child. Or to Joseph, don't divorce her quietly. Really, the story begins with Mary's aunt. It really begins with Aunt Elizabeth and Uncle Zechariah. Say that with me. Aunt Elizabeth, Uncle Zechariah. And so Aunt Elizabeth and Uncle Zechariah were in the priestly lineage of Aaron. And so they had great hopes, great expectations, but life had not turned out well for them. Elizabeth and Zechariah are old. She is barren. She cannot have kids. And so Zechariah's got all these dreams about having a great family. I got daughters that will marry priests. I have sons that will become priests. That didn't work out. So I'll throw myself into my vocation and become a great, priest, a high priest. And that didn't work out. And now he's going through the routines of life. And that's where we're going to pick up the story in Luke chapter 1, verse 5. Here we go. In the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah. This is Uncle Zach, okay? Who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God. They observed all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Once, when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as priest before God, he was chosen by Lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and to burn incense. And when the time came for the burning of the incense, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and he was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer's been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you're to call him John. And he will be a joy and a delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to drink wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born." John Mark, you might want to look at verse 115. Just a thought. That just came to me, brother. That just came to me. Verse 16. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. And he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and the power of Elijah to turn the hearts of their parents to their children and the disobedient of the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. This was the greatest spiritual moment of his life. And he was not prepared. It was the greatest. It was a tremendous encounter from God to him, and he had not made room for God in his life. Read verse 18, Kaylin.
Verse 18 says, Zechariah asked the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I am an old man, and my wife is well along in years."
You see, here's the point. Only a heart prepared for an encounter can recognize an encounter. Only a heart prepared. A heart that's unprepared cannot recognize a heavenly visitation when God comes to him or God comes to her. Only a heart prepared for an encounter can recognize an encounter. Jeannie, read verses 19 and 20 for us, please.
And I'm sitting in that. That's good. The angel said to him, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time."
You know, I remember preaching on this, and I was hard on Zechariah. I remember that I just said, he blew it, he missed it. He was in the presence of Gabriel. How in the world? And God was punishing him by causing him to be silent. I don't think that's what happened at all. About a month ago, I'm at John Chestnut Park all by myself working on this. And it's like the Lord said to me, I didn't punish Zechariah. I gave Zechariah a chance to sit in his encounter. I came to Zechariah. I gave him 9 months to rehearse this over and over and over and over and over again. I love him so much that I gave him a chance to just sit in the encounter. And he had to think about it. And for 9 long months, he couldn't speak. He had to think about, I was at the right side of the altar of incense. I wasn't on the left side. I was not by the golden lampstand. I was by the table of showbread. He knew exactly where he was. And he goes over this again and again and again. And he realized that he missed this incredible encounter. But God is merciful. God is merciful to you. Did you hear the thunder? It's coming. God's merciful. He's merciful to you. He's merciful to me. And even though he missed his encounter, he allowed him to sit in his encounter for 9 months. Now, I love the next part of the story. Because the next part of the story is Zechariah then, the baby's born, they were old, they got a miracle, they got a blessing from God. He names the boy John. Now he can speak, and now he's going to sing. Because you see, he's had an encounter. And when you have an encounter, you can't keep it to yourself. You got to get it out. It's got to come. You got to share it with everybody. This is an encounter that's got to be revealed and related to everybody who's around you. And so here is a part called Zechariah's song that we never read at Christmas time, but I want you to read it. I want you guys to read this for me now, because here's an older man who is so happy that he finally figured out his encounter and he can't keep the song to himself. So picture this. An old man who threw himself into his work. That didn't work. He threw himself into his family. That was disappointing. And now he's thrown himself into God, and that is just incredible. Read this, Hans, and let's
I'll start it at Luke 1:67.
Okay.
His father Zechariah was filled with the Holy Spirit and prophesied, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come to his people and redeemed them. He has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David."
And you, my child, will be called a prophet of the Most High. For you will go on before the Lord to prepare the way for him, to give his people the knowledge of salvation through the forgiveness of their sins because of the tender mercy of our God, by which the rising sun will come to us from heaven, to shine on those living in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the path of peace.
So here's an older, broken down man so discouraged that life had left him thirsty. And now he has a fountain of ever-flowing life flowing through him. You see, here's the point. Once you have an encounter, you carry that encounter. Amen. You carry it. Once you have an encounter, you carry that encounter. And some of you right now are thinking to yourself, well, I've never had an encounter. That's not true. Wow. You've just missed it. Wow. You've missed your encounter. He comes to you over and over and over and over again. He is so merciful. You could have blown the first 25 encounters. He's going to come to you a 26th time. He loves you so much. He wants to encounter you each and every time of your life. And so when I was a younger preacher, I'm still incredibly young, by the way. Still incredibly young. But when I was younger, I'll never forget how people would ask me to go visit, Uncle Harry or Aunt Maybelle. They're 90 or 95 and about to die. They're in hospice or they're in a hospital and they've not accepted Christ. And I can remember the pressure. I mean, man, if I don't do this right, Aunt Mabel's not going to be in glory, And I thought about that. And then finally, about 10 years ago, I realized something. God's not going to put their salvation on me. In fact, God spoke to me very clearly about this. Kurt, I've already come to Aunt Mabel. I've come to Aunt Mabel when she was 3 years old. I came to Aunt Mabel when she was 5 years old. I came to Aunt Mabel when she was in the 3rd grade. I came to her in middle school and I came to her in high school. I came to her when she had her first child. I came to her when she went through a messy divorce. I came to her over and over and over again. And I realized that me going and visiting a 92-year-old woman or man at their death, that was not going to be the first time they had ever had an encounter. God loves you so much. He is passionate about having these encounters with you. You may have blown a bunch of them, but today is a brand new day. This is a brand new season, and we go forward. And today, you cannot miss your encounter. Once you have an encounter, you carry that encounter. And that's what he wants you to do. Now, the way you have encounters is what? You prepare him room. So think about your schedule. Think about your life. Now, I think that you're here and you're online and you're in the lobby. You're preparing him room tonight. You're here because you want to encounter the King of the universe. You're online, you're in your home, you're in Florida, you're out of state. You want to experience God in some great and miraculous way. So let's pull that apart for just a minute. I have to cultivate relationships. If I don't make room for certain relationships, I won't have a relationship, right? If Danita and I don't ever go on vacation together, don't ever go on a date together, if Danita and I don't ever go spend time together, we love our family, we love our friends, we love to just be on vacation by ourselves. I am so honored to be able to work with Ethan the last 5 years here at Harborside. This is a dream come true for a pastor, for a daddy. This could not be a greater dream to work with such a fine young man who's never given us a moment's trouble. And it's always, he hasn't. It's pretty amazing. Our prayer life has increased because of his adventure. But the ability to do life with Ethan has been phenomenal. My daughters, Erica and Emily. If I don't spend time with Erica and Emily, if I don't spend time with Jeff, son-in-law, with Andrew, son-in-law, we're gaining a daughter-in-law in the end of February. If we don't spend time, we have 2 amazing grandchildren. One's 1 year old, one's 2 years old. And the ability to do life with if I don't spend time with them, so why would I not spend time with Jesus? There's really nobody who loves me more, even if my mother's watching and my wife is on stage right now. There's nobody in the world who loves me more than Jesus. There's nobody in the world who has my best interest in mind more than Jesus. There is nobody in your life, our lives, our church, our staff, there's nobody who has your best interest more than Jesus. So we just kind of get distracted. Maybe it's just unintentional that we begin to drift. You know, no one ever drifts north, by the way. You always drift south, don't you? You always go downstream. You never drift upstream. And so this really is an intentional relationship. So let me ask the team, how do we make room? How do we make room for Jesus? Or maybe we should start with, are there things that we need to discard in order to catch Jesus? You want to start?
Yeah, I think one really practical thing we can do is look at our calendar. It's as simple as pulling out our phone, our computer, looking at our calendar. And if God's not on it, we haven't prepared him room. And if we want to prepare him room, then we need to discard something on it and put him on the schedule, put him on the calendar.
That's good. Amos, what about you?
Yeah, Kurt, I'm actually living this right now. My wife and I, we have our family coming in town. My in-laws, they're actually on I-75 right now on our way to our place. And this whole week we've been preparing room for them to come and spend time with us. And what's interesting is that our place only has a certain amount of room, but now that our in-laws are coming, we've just switched everything around. We've moved things, we've put things aside. And Kurt, what I just heard you say, I didn't really hear it before, but what I heard you say was, we don't ascribe the right value to the things that are currently occupying the space. And so what I think we can do practically is to analyze the room in our heart, the room in our lives. We've put the wrong price tag on those things, and we've made those things more valuable than the presence of God, the presence of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And it's time to switch the price tag and put the value on the King of Kings and the presence of God.
So some things have to be discarded to make room. and that we have to recognize value. That's really good. Danita, how do you make room? And I'm asking because I already know this answer because I've watched you for 36 years. But I've also watched that as our lives get busier and there's more challenges, I've also watched you not make less time. I've watched you make more time.
Well, first, Kurt, I agree with what you said earlier. We are continuing to squeeze people into our table as our family expands. And the reason for that is because there's good food and there's good fellowship. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." And I love this one translation of that verse. It says, "Step out of the traffic. Step out of the traffic and take a long, loving look at God Most High." And so, Kurt, when I make room, I'm literally stepping out of the traffic of our busyness, of our schedules, of our plans that to me might seem important, but I have to make that room. And I know that Isaiah 9, he said to us, "A child will be born, a son will be given." And the first name that he describes Jesus as is Wonderful Counselor. So when I step out of the traffic and I make room and I get around that table for food and fellowship, I am there to receive counsel. And we all need counsel, don't we? All of us need counsel. And I know you need counsel especially. No, we all need I need it for my life. I need it for my marriage. I need it for parenting, for grandparenting. I need it for relationships. I need it for finances. I need it for my health. I need that counsel. And it's not just any counsel. It is wonderful counsel. Money cannot buy this counsel. And so when I step out, Kurt, and I take that time to make room, that's the most powerful thing, is that I am receiving the counsel from the wonderful counselor.
I like that about the traffic. I've never thought about the traffic before. Ethan, why would we make room?
Yeah, I think the why is fellowship. I think this is what you and I are really longing for, whether you know it or not, that you are longing for fellowship with God. And so we try to fellowship with different things. We try to make room and time for different things in our life, but we end up empty. We end up dissatisfied. We end up more hungry than when we began to satisfy ourselves with something other than God. And so as we prepare room for Jesus, we create space for him. He begins to meet you and I where we are, and our hearts become alive. We become full. And I'm learning from that place as we learn to fellowship. That's what we're created for. That's why we prepare him room. Now we actually learn to fellowship with the people around us. Now I'm not trying to get stuff, life from the people around me. I've already received that, and so I'm able to give that. And so the why that I'm learning, why do we want to prepare him room? We were created for fellowship. This is what we are longing for.
So you make space, he fills you, and the fellowship and the food, now you're able to really give instead of trying to take from everybody around you. That's so much powerful. Well, as I was talking to my mentor, he shared with me a poem that another inmate had written to him. And I got one more jail story, if you'll let me. This was a poem written by a man that was still in prison, but it's pretty cool. His name was Steve Werlip, and he was inmate number such and such, such and such. Here's the poem that he wrote to Mr. Stickler. I was locked up in the county jail when a man came to me. He handed me a Bible and said, "Brother, won't you read?" I kind of smiled and said, "It's too late for me now. I could read the words 1,000 times. He wouldn't hear me anyhow. I've done things in my lifetime that I cannot reveal, and there is no way I can tell him just the way I feel." And that's when Don Stickler said, "That's where you're wrong. God is with you every day. He knows just what is in your heart before you even start to pray." And with those words, he turned around, slowly walked away. I just laughed and told myself, "Go on and do your time." But the words, the man said, kept pressing on my mind. I picked up the Bible and I started to read, and I couldn't put it down. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the glorious life they found. But in the book of Psalms I read, the words I had to say, I fell down on my knees that night and I began to pray. Lord, forgive me for my sins and wash them all away. And may God remember me on that judgment day. Now, I thank the Lord each time I pray for giving me the will to take the Bible out of Don Stickler's hand. And when I leave these prison walls, life will be good for me, For my love is in Jesus, and his love is in me. Now, it's obvious that the hero of that poem is Jesus Christ, but there's another hero in that story. There's a preacher that for 40 years goes to Quincy, Illinois County Courthouse and just preaches the gospel and has inmates spitting on him, cursing on him. Man, not a lot of fanfare, not a lot of fame would come out of that. But he'd had an encounter. And when you have an encounter, you carry an encounter. And that's what you want. You want to carry your encounter. I love how God comes to you and me. And I realize that the older I get, time is more precious than anything else. Time is the most precious commodity. You can always do this or do it, but you can't have more time. And so I'm trying to make more room for Jesus than ever before. The secret place has changed my life. The secret place is where it's at. A couple weeks ago, Tom Goodlett was preaching, and it's the first Sunday, really since January, that I was in here without any responsibilities. And we've been closed for quite a bit of the year, but I was in the room, and the room had people in it. And during the meeting place, I realized why we come together in the meeting place. I was overwhelmed with the Spirit of God, not just in me, but in all the people around me. It was like the Jesus in her was reaching out to the Jesus in me. The Jesus in him was reaching out to the Jesus in me. And I realized then that collectively, that's what we're missing right now. We're missing the fact that we all have this Holy Spirit in you, and the Jesus in me wants to high five the Jesus in you, and the Jesus in you wants to high five the Jesus in you. And it was just so powerful how that took place. So we worship him. We honor him. And we go forward.